thank you so much for having me here. It's really nice to be a part of another CityEngine User Meeting. It's really nice to see you all here. Thank you, Matt, Gabriella, for organizing all this. Right, so I'm going to talk about something very different. It's an academic project, and it has to do with libraries. And you may wonder a little bit about how is libraries related to CityEngine, or what on earth am I doing? But I'll get to that. So first, just to say that I'm a research fellow currently in the British Library and the Alan Turing Institute. The British Library is obviously like a huge organization which has lots of collections and preserved items, millions of items, digital, both digital and physical. The Alan Turing Institute is at the National Center for Artificial Intelligence in the UK. And luckily, it's based inside the British Library, which is super convenient for me because I just work in one place. Right, so I'd like to start this presentation with something I've shown before. But this is actually this image is very dear to me because it was my first encounter with CityEngine. This is how I learned about CityEngine. It was when I was studying at the Center for Advanced Spatial Analysis in UCL. I was doing my master's. And at the time, my later on PhD supervisor, Professor Andrew Hudson-Smith, who created this image, actually, he took the logo of the department and turned it into a city using CityEngine. He was teaching us how to use CityEngine to create 3D cities for the use in a virtual environment. So after I went through these courses, I started using CityEngine, but I used it for something very, very different. So I was impressed by the dynamic characteristics of CityEngine. I thought that was extremely powerful, the fact that you can use sliders to globally affect the city. And I started to thinking how we can actually use these characteristics to understand the different interdependencies between different urban systems. So for example, how do land uses change over time? How does, for example, if you put like an industry somewhere, it'll drove away the residential areas, or so I started to go into something that's called spatial analysis. And I started to perform using the Python platform to write models on how to model these interdependencies, how to visualize them. And the sliders were really useful because I could quickly change the different parameters and see how everything affects everything else. So that was my master's thesis, and that led me to my PhD, which is a large part of it is based on CityEngine, and I hope I'm the first PhD to do that, and hopefully many more will follow. It's published recently, so if you're interested, I think it should be published in the UCL website. I think they have everything online, so feel free to download it and see what it's about. It has a very PhD-esque title. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to integrate urban analytics, data analysis methods, some urban planning methodologies, and some APIs, and later on some online distribution of scenarios via Unity into CityEngine. So, right, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but if you're interested into what is urban analytics, because it's a very vague notion and it's one of those buzzwords that have been going around lately quite a lot, there's a very nice paper recently published by Michael Batty, which tries to define what is urban analytics and how we can use it to do analysis of cities. And he says that, he mentions that the term analytics implies a set of methods that can be used to explore, understand, and predict properties and features of any system, in case our cities. So you can download this, it's also online, and it's freely available. Right, so back to the project. So how does that relate to libraries and what I'm doing in CityEngine? So the project that I'm working on is called Data-Driven Libraries. We're currently three people in this project. It's me, as Maja Maricevic from the British Library, and is Sir Alan Wilson, who is the director of the Turing Institute, and now he's the director of special projects. It's quite an experimental project because it tries to bring these two organizations together who are very, very different. On one hand, a very traditional data preserving and resources preserving organization. On the other hand, a newly founded research center that deals with a lot of cutting edge data science methodologies that's trying to apply it in real world. So the scope of the project becomes something like this. We're trying to develop a collaborated research to understand how data science can benefit libraries. Very, very broad scope. But essentially, we are collecting a lot of data to understand what are libraries, how they're used, and how do they affect cities as a social infrastructure. We're working with, it's quite an early stage, it's phase 1 of the project, but we're working with lots of different organizations. We work with a lot of governmental organizations to get data. We've talked a lot with individuals who have developed amazing projects such as Libraries Hacked. So if you're interested in libraries or online dashboards, there's this fantastic project called Libraries Hacked, and it has everything available on GitHub, APIs that develops dashboards for data relating to libraries in the UK. We're also working with Newcastle Libraries to create a deep dive there, and obviously people from the Alan Turing Institute and the British Library. Right, so just to start with the big picture. There are about 4,000 public libraries in the UK. And these are just public libraries, not research libraries, not school libraries, not health libraries, just public libraries. And at the time, when they were installed, they were very useful. Most of them were built during the Industrial Revolution as a way to educate the working classes. So very, very important for the education of people. It was essentially access to knowledge. Nowadays, with the development of the internet, with the distribution of all resources online, libraries are kind of losing their identity. They don't really know what they are. We don't really know what they are. Nobody knows what they are. This map didn't even exist. Nobody has ever mapped anything about libraries. We know a lot of things about schools. We know a lot of things about hospitals or different provisions, social provisions that the city has. But for cultural institutions, museums, libraries, and so on, there's not much research going on of what is their value. And that's because everything is changing now. As a result, the government has started cutting. The first thing that the government is doing is cutting funds on anything that has to do with culture. So museums, libraries, all the GLAM institutions. So, so far there are about 500 libraries have closed in England, in Wales and Scotland. There are more things happening, and nobody has ever studied what's the effect of this. Does anybody need libraries? What's their use? So there's like a lot of question marks that need to be answered. So some of the questions that this project is trying to answer is, are these closures cut somehow justified? Because is it that people no longer use libraries, or is it because the quality of the libraries, because of the closures and lack of funds, deteriorates, that people don't want to visit them anymore, or there's not enough money to do things? Are libraries still important social institution for the communities and the city? I mean, for example, how many of you use libraries? 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Yes, 20 people. I think half the people here use libraries. That's cool. Okay. But still, are they still important? Would we be okay if they just suddenly disappeared? Possibly. And finally, since everything is cutting down on funds, can libraries optimize their network of joint resources and funds and costs by targeting very demanded facilities? These are questions that have popped up from talking to multiple organizations. And what we're doing with the Alan Turing and the libraries is adopting a data-driven approach. So we're collecting data to understand all these questions and if there's any reasons why these things happen. So what data tells us so far is that there is a steady decline in library usage, which is followed by an increase in the use of online resources. So the more libraries digitize their stuff and they put them online, the more people use them, and therefore the visits in the library drop. Deprived areas tend to prefer physical resources for self-improvement and self-help and less digital resources. But for mostly educated areas, which I assume is what's happening in Zurich, there's an increasing demand for workspaces. So people tend to go to libraries, to use their desks, use their internet, and do startups or do all sorts of study or do all sorts of crazy stuff. So we collect data from many members. So for example, how many members do they have? What's the usage? What's their demand for workspaces? What types of facilities do they have? Because now that libraries are changing, they have like different facilities. They have unemployment centers. They have recreation centers. They have all sorts of things, events, exhibitions. We're trying to collect data for where do people come from and who uses their digital resources and at which times of the day and what are the fluctuations of usage due to this whole digitization. So normally when people do these types of analysis, they're using data software platforms. So a very popular one is R for data scientists. It's an open platform, which is why it's very popular. You can upload lots of big data, do lots of analysis. Tableau is another quite popular for a visualization platform. Python is getting increasingly popular because it has developed libraries for data analysis that are extremely powerful. And MATLAB is also extremely popular, even though it's paid, so not many people are using it because of that reason. So how does that relate to CityEngine? Personally, I kind of like CityEngine and to use it for this kind of purpose, for data analysis, precisely because it has this Python platform. And we can use it to start integrating very powerful Python libraries, so such as NumPy, SciPy, or Pandas is very good libraries for Python. So we can actually perform this type of urban analytics within CityEngine and also make use of the powerful design tools that CityEngine has and also create dynamic scenarios. So we can use ready-made functions that do regression analysis to any kind of urban analytics to creating our own tools for urban analytics and have them all these in a joint control system using like the inspector that controls both the visualization and the data analysis part, which I find extremely powerful. And to demo that, I've shown this before. This is a project we did like long ago in my PhD, in my first or second year of my PhD, where we used a library from Python called TweetPy, which is still available. And we integrated it in CityEngine. We've put it in the Python, inside the Python. And we started real-time collecting geolocated tweets from all over London. And we started growing buildings based on the number of tweets from that platform. So after this was done, we had like buildings that you could click on and you could see who tweeted from that building and what did they say. So the British Library is, where is it? This is King's Cross. This is the British Library. You can see that it pops up. The British Museum here. It's actually quite accurate. So the reason I'm showing this is because the whole code is available in GitHub. So if you want to see how it works, it still works. I've tried it two months ago. It surprisingly still works. All the Python, the CGA rules, whatever is available there, so you can have a look and see how it's done. Right. So all this urban analytics is what we're doing in this project is we'll try to use urban analytics to create a realistic tools of how libraries serve population. So we need to understand, first of all, what are libraries and what type of facilities do they have? How are they used from people? How they are transforming? What is the type of population that uses libraries? So, for example, students tend to use more research libraries than the public. Deprived areas, older population tend to use more libraries for physical resources. So that there is a demand, but we need to understand how and where it exists. And also, what is their catchment areas? What does it depend on? So who travels to good libraries, for what reason? In order to be able to understand how we can optimize this kind of, for their facilities, what is better for them to do and how they can optimize their costs and resources. Right. So in order to do that, we wrote something in CityEngine, which is based on this model. This is a very old model from the 70s, developed by Alan Wilson and Harris. But it's been used until now because it's quite successful. So it's been used by supermarkets. It's been used by retails all over the world in order to understand where to allocate a new supermarket, where's the best way to, so it analyzes population and it tells you where's the best location to put a new retail center. Or it can also tell you where's the best location to put it in order to generate the most profit. It's a very simple model. I'm not going to go into the maths, but essentially it calculates flows from residential areas to retail centers. And what we're trying to do is apply this for libraries. So again, I'm not going to go too much into things, but right, I shouldn't probably go too much into things, but yeah, okay. But this is the retail model, and this is how we transform it for libraries, which is essentially that we change certain types of indicators. Now, what we do in CityEngine is we write this in Python. And I don't have results yet because we still have in the phase where we're collecting data. But I've developed like a super simple toy model using the standard lovely random generator of streets and plots to show you how it works. So we can change land use to libraries, what type of libraries, change library type to whatever it is, public, research, or whatever. Change the number of resources it has, how many books, how many journals, how much workspace it provides. And then we can also control populations and zones. So we can say that here we leave a lot of students. Imagine that this area is replaced with the real data. And then we can run the model to see which areas are the ones that demand libraries and for which reason. Right. So the good thing about this, I'm not going to go into that either. We can use this to actually, through the previous method, to calculate the catchment areas of these libraries. So this is not, this again is a bit of a toy model from previous work, but it's the same kind of principle where we run the model and we're starting to see who is allocated to which library. And we can also have this type of statistics and analytics at the end, which is really useful. So what we're doing, right, so we're doing a deep dive in Newcastle, which is this area here. These are the libraries. They're extruded by the number of resources they have and spaces. And we're going to start working on it quite soon. Unfortunately, it's a very early stage. So if you want to keep track of the project, please follow the Turing website. There's going to be a website for this project soon. And there's also a GitHub account, which is going to be published quite soon with all the code freely available. So what we're hoping to do is apply this in the UK and then apply it in countries that don't have the same funds. For example, in Africa, there's a huge demand for knowledge. There are not enough funds, and it would be an incredible tool to use to allocate libraries or like different facilities in strategic parts that can optimize their resources and accessibility. Right, so, whoops. Yeah, okay, so why am I showing this? I forgot why I've put this in. Okay, I think I remember. Right, so I was saying that there's not much outputs yet for this, but we do have a workflow that, sorry, we do have a paper being published soon that shows how we are using this urban modeling techniques, urban analytics, as a service to develop applications. And this is like a very different project. This is again like a workflow that kind of pushes, is this workflow here, pushes information from CityEngine, takes their reports and uses the metadata to bring them to Unity and create all these different sliders and so on. But in this paper, and because I'm working for the Turing Institute, I should mention that, we're using a very complex methodology, and we're using a certain kind of artificial intelligence framework in order to accelerate the calculations, because these calculations can take a lot of time. So this is part of the Quant project, which is developed by Richard Milton, and it's led by Michael Batty. So what Richard has done is that he developed a service where he accelerates the calculations of algorithm in order to be able to bring them in other applications, and in this case, CityEngine, where we are using this to produce the different types of scenarios. Right, so yeah, so if you're interested in this paper, yeah, that one. So if you're interested in this paper, it's going to be published in a couple of weeks' time. It's going to be preceded and used in the CEUM2019 proceedings. And we're going to be doing a few more things with CityEngine and artificial intelligence at the Turing, but that's further work to be done. So if you want to follow us or send me an email, we'll keep you updated with what's going on. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Flora. Do you have any questions right now?
Hope it wasn't too confusing.
No.
What's the implication of libraries that are basically getting lost? Are people sad, or do they say that it's more something that is that still has, or just has some sort of melancholic component of having a physical book, or is everybody saying that we have what you need books for? Or
yeah.
What's the outtake that you hear from users?
So there's different things. So first of all, libraries are not just about books anymore. They have other facilities. So there's a huge amount of digitization being stored within libraries. So sometimes when a library shuts down, you cannot access this information through the internet because it's in their own personal resources. The British Library has servers, for example. But it also has unemployment services, so people who are unemployed, they go there and there is a kind of nostalgic aspect to it. So for example, I was quite surprised to hear that the MPs are terrified of shutting down libraries because the community, the people around, love them so much that if they do that, they will never get reelected. So there is this aspect of, yes, we want this because it's part of our, it's part of who we are, and it's part of it. So that's from a sentimental point of view. In terms of practical point of view and in terms of data analysis, there are areas that don't have access to specific types of education. So there are areas in the UK that are quite remote. There is older population who doesn't have access to internet or to computers or anything like that. They use the libraries to practically enhance the skills. They're students who need research books that they're not online. So they need to use libraries in order to do their research for their PhD. Even though I never use one, but please cut that out from the recording. So yeah, there is a practical need for libraries, but this is exactly what we're studying, is what is this practical need? And if we can analyze the population that's using it, what is the demand for different facilities? Because in an area, you could have a demand for, I don't know, like architectural books, because there are a lot of architects, and there may be libraries that don't have any type of this kind of resources. Or maker spaces, for example, is another huge thing. They do, yeah, they do. That's true. Putting cafes is part of their marketing techniques. But actually, this is quite an interesting point, because recently the British Library had an Algorave party. Do you know what an Algorave is? It's music that's produced by developers. So you have like real-time people sitting in front of a computer coding music, and then people dancing. So you do get like startups, or like they had like a Harry Potter exhibition, and that the reason they do that is because they want to attract population from different categories of people, because a Harry Potter exhibition is going to be used by families that don't use libraries for research purposes, or the Algorave may attract different types of people, and that kind of expands their pool in a way of people. So it is a good strategy to follow for them, but that's part of the thing that needs to be discovered. Thank you. Thank you.